Hey everyone, and welcome to a deep dive specifically curated for all you Vintage Car Chronicles fans out there. We're about to explore the fascinating history of the Porsche 911.
From its humble beginnings to its latest iterations, the 911's journey is really a testament to, to constant evolution and innovation.
You got that right. I mean, what other sports car has managed to stay relevant for over 6 decades?
Exactly. It's a car that's captured the hearts of generations and continues to set benchmarks in the automotive world.
All right, so let's rewind the clock back to 1963. Picture this, the Frankfurt Motor Show. The buzz is all about Porsche's brand new sports car.
The 901?
Well, initially, yeah.
Ah, right. The name change.
A little bit of trademark drama courtesy of Peugeot. They weren't too keen on car names with a zero in the middle.
And thus the iconic 911 was born.
Truly a happy accident. But name aside, the 911 was designed to be a major step up from its predecessor, the Porsche 356.
It had to be more powerful, more spacious, more comfortable, basically everything you could want more of.
More Porsche. So what were we working with engine-wise in these early 911s?
So the early models boasted a 2-liter air-cooled flat-six engine. Output was around 130 horsepower, which, wasn't bad for the time.
Especially considering they weighed in at about a ton.
Exactly. A ton of German engineering.
Speaking of power, we can't talk about early 911s without mentioning the legendary 2.7 Carrera RS. I mean, this car is a holy grail for collectors even today. What made it so special?
Well, the Carrera RS was a game changer. It was a homologation special built to meet racing regulations.
But it also became a street legal icon.
Precisely. Porsche went all out to reduce weight, thinner steel, fiberglass bumpers instead of the standard steel ones.
So they were serious about making it attractive.
Absolutely. And then there was the engine, a 2.7-liter flat-six producing a screaming 210 horsepower.
Whoa. That must have been something else back then.
Oh, it was a beast. Top speed of over 140 miles per hour made it the fastest German production car at the time, and it solidified the 911's reputation as a performance car to be reckoned with.
So it wasn't just about looking good. It was about leaving the competition in the dust.
You got it. It was raw, visceral, and absolutely unforgettable. Really captures the spirit of the early 911s.
Okay, let's shift gears now and cruise into the era of the G Series, the longest-running 911 series. Yeah. Produced from 1973 to 1989.
A long and impactful run. This era really marked a significant shift, both in design and in technology.
Definitely. One of the most noticeable changes, I think, was the introduction of those impact bumpers.
Yes. A necessary evil. All thanks to the ever-increasing U.S. crash test standards.
Not the most elegant design element, but hey, safety first, right?
Right, and you can't deny that kind of became a signature look for the G Series, those raised bumpers, the black rubber bellows.
Definitely distinctive. But let's not forget about the other major development in this era, the 911 Turbo.
The legend was born. We're talking the 930 Turbo, right?
Yeah, the Widowmaker.
Debuted in 1975. Packed a turbocharged 3.0-liter engine, putting out a mind-blowing 260 horsepower.
That's supercar territory for the time.
It was 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds. A genuine supercar. And of course, Porsche continued to refine it throughout the G Series, increasing the displacement to 3.3 liters.
And eventually squeezing out over 300 horsepower.
A true performance icon, setting the benchmark for sports cars everywhere.
But it wasn't all about speed and power, was it? The G Series also saw the arrival of a new body style, the Cabriolet.
Ah, yes. The Cabriolet, 1983, expanded the 911's appeal to a whole new audience.
Open-air driving with that iconic flat-six engine soundtrack. What's not to love?
A brilliant move by Porsche, tapping into a market that craved both style and performance.
Speaking of style, towards the end of the G Series production, Porsche decided to pay homage to its roots.
With the 911 Carrera Speedster, a limited edition model released in 1989, channeling the spirit of the classic 356 Speedster from the 50s.
A perfect blend of heritage and modern performance.
Exactly. A beautifully executed car that really captured the essence of Porsche. Okay, so we've covered the early years, we've talked about the game-changing G-Series.
What do you say we dive into the late 80s and early 90s? This is when things get really interesting with the 964.
The 964, a turning point. The first major redesign since the original. It brought in a wave of new technologies and features that laid the groundwork for the modern 911s we know and love today.
That's where we'll pick up after a quick break.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of our deep dive into the Porsche 911.
All right, we're back and ready to talk about the 964, a car that truly brought the 911 into the modern era. What were some of those innovations that made it such a game changer?
Well, for starters, it was the first 911 to offer all-wheel drive.
All-wheel drives on a 911.
Yep. A feature that would become synonymous with Porsche's performance and versatility.
I can imagine that was a revelation for drivers, especially those who wanted to drive their 911s year-round, no matter the weather.
Absolutely. Think about it. This was back in the late 80s. Porsche's all-wheel drive system was incredibly advanced for its time. It could automatically transfer power between the front and rear axles depending on the grip available, ensuring maximum traction and stability, rain or shine.
So it wasn't just about going fast in a straight line. It was about being able to handle whatever came your way.
Exactly. It was a whole new level of performance and control.
And what about the engine? Did they stick with the 3.6-liter?
The 964 did boast a new 3.6-liter flat six. It became a staple for future 911s, and it produced a healthy 250 horsepower. But what's even more impressive is how much smoother and refined the power delivery was compared to its predecessors.
I bet that extra displacement made a big difference in terms of low-end torque.
It did. The 964 was just a much more effortless car to drive. And of course, we can't forget about the turbo. First, with the refined 3.3-liter engine from the G series. And then in '92, they introduced a turbocharged version of that new 3.6-liter.
Oh yeah, the 964 Turbo. A true force to be reckoned with.
It was a beast.
But it wasn't just about performance, was it? The 964 also marked a significant step forward in terms of safety and comfort.
Absolutely. In 1991, the 964 was one of the first cars in the world to offer dual airbags as standard equipment, a huge step forward in automotive safety.
Especially back then when airbags were still a relatively new thing. It's amazing how far safety technology has come since then. But let's not get sidetracked. Porsche also introduced a new version of the Carrera RS with the 964, right?
But they did. The 964 Carrera RS was a stripped-down, track-focused machine. It was a real homage to the legendary 2.7 Carrera RS. Now, the European version was a homologation special built for racing. But they created the RS America specifically for the US market, more of an option-delete variant, focused on saving weight and maximizing performance.
So for those who might not be familiar with the lingo, could you explain what a homologation special and an option-delete variant are?
Sure, so a homologation special is basically a limited production car built specifically to meet the regulations of a certain racing series, often very raw, very performance-oriented. And an option-delete variant is basically a way for manufacturers to offer a more basic model, often at a lower price point. So in the case of the RS America, things like power windows and sound deadening were removed, and it came with a fixed rear spoiler.
So it was all about getting back to the basics,
Yep.
a pure and unadulterated driving experience.
Precisely, the essence of the 911. And it's a highly sought-after car by collectors today.
Speaking of highly sought-after cars, the 993 is often considered to be the pinnacle of air-cooled 911s. What is it about the 993 that makes it so special for Porsche enthusiasts?
The 993, produced from '93 to '98. It's often referred to as the ultimate 911, and for good reason. It took everything great about the 911 and refined it even further. Both beautiful and incredibly capable, it's widely considered one of the best-handling 911s ever made. And the design, timeless.
It really is a stunning car. Those integrated bumpers, the smooth lines, it just oozes elegance and purpose.
Doesn't it? And let's not forget, this was the last 911 to feature an air-cooled engine, a big part of its appeal for purists. The culmination of over 3 decades of air-cooled 911 development, and it went out on a high note.
Under the hood, we still have that 3.6-liter flat six, but I imagine it's been tweaked and refined.
Absolutely. In the 990, that 3.6-liter engine started out with 272 horsepower, but later they introduced the VarioRam system, a variable intake system, increased the output to 286 horsepower.
VarioRam, what's that all about?
VarioRam was this really clever system that changed the length of the intake runners based on engine speed. So it basically optimized the airflow for both low-end torque and high-end power, so the engine was able to breathe better and perform more efficiently.
So it was a win-win situation, more power throughout the rev range.
We got it. The 993 was truly a special car, and in many ways it marked the end of an era for the 911.
Speaking of the end of an era, the transition from air-cooled to water-cooled engines, that must have been a tough decision for Porsche, considering how iconic the air-cooled engine had become.
It was a bold move, and certainly a controversial one. Air-cooled engines were a defining feature of the 911 for over 3 decades. And there were a lot of purists who felt that water cooling would somehow dilute the 911's character.
So why did Porsche make the switch? Was it purely a matter of performance, or were there other factors involved?
Performance was definitely a factor. Water-cooled engines offer more precise temperature control. which translates to more power and better efficiency. But there were also those increasingly stringent emissions regulations globally, and air-cooled engines were having trouble meeting those standards.
So it was a necessary evolution, a way to ensure the 911 could keep up with the times.
You could say that. It was a new chapter for the 911.
And that new chapter began with the 996, debuted in 1997. This wasn't just a new engine. It was a radical departure, a completely new look inside and out, a clean break from the past.
It was. The 996 was a statement from Porsche. They were willing to take risks, to push the boundaries. And while it wasn't universally loved at first, it's definitely aged well, and is now seen as a significant step in the 911's evolution.
Some people argue that the 996 wasn't a true 911 because of the water-cooled engine and the new design. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's important to remember that the 911 has always been about evolution. Right from the start, Porsche has never stopped refining and improving the 911, always pushing the boundaries of performance and technology. The 996 was simply the next logical step in that journey.
And in terms of performance, it didn't disappoint.
Right.
That water-cooled 3.6-liter engine in the base Carrera was churning out 300 horsepower.
It was a quick car, no doubt about it. And then there was the 996 Turbo. Now that was a monster. Twin turbocharged 3.6-liter engine, a staggering 420 horsepower.
The 996 Turbo was in a league of its own.
It was.
And the 996 also marked the birth of another legendary 911, the GT3.
Ah, yes, the GT3. This was Porsche going back to its racing roots. A stripped-down, track-focused machine that showcased their engineering prowess.
A pure driver's car. No frills, just pure driving thrills.
And it set a new standard for high-performance 911s, a standard that they've continued to build upon. The GT3 is really a testament to Porsche's commitment to building cars that are equally at home on the track as they are on the road.
So despite the initial controversy, the 996 proved to be a pivotal model in the 911's history. It paved the way for the modern 911s we see today.
It did. And speaking of modern 911s, let's move on to the 997. Introduced in 2004, it took the best of the 996 and refined it even further, both visually stunning and incredibly capable.
The 997 is often seen as a return to form for the 911, wouldn't you say? Those classic round headlights made a comeback, and the overall design was just more refined.
The 997 was a beautiful car, but it wasn't just about the looks. It also featured a range of updated engines, a new 3.6-liter in the base Carrera, putting out 325 horsepower, and the Carrera S got a 3.8-liter with 355 horsepower.
And let's not forget the 997 Turbo, even more powerful than its predecessor. But the 997 also brought some key technological advancements to the table.
You're right. In 2008, with the 997.2 update, Porsche introduced direct fuel injection, improved both power and efficiency, and perhaps even more significant was the introduction of the PDK transmission, Porsche's dual-clutch gearbox.
The PDK. That was a game changer. Lightning-fast gear changes, seamless power delivery. It really took the 911's performance to another level, though I remember some purists weren't too happy about the move away from a traditional manual. What were your thoughts on the PDK when it first came out?
I have to admit, I was a little skeptical at first. There's something so satisfying about driving a sports car with a manual gearbox. But once I experienced the PDK, I was completely blown away. The speed, the precision, it transformed the driving experience. Even the most die-hard manual fans had to admit it was impressive.
The 997 generation also saw a big expansion of the 911 model range, didn't it? It felt like there was a 911 for everyone.
Exactly. From the track-focused GT3 RS to the more luxurious Targa, there was a 997 to suit every taste and budget. It really was a golden age for the 911.
We've covered a lot of ground here, from those air-cooled classics to the water-cooled era and the introduction of the PDK transmission. But we're not done yet. Let's dive into the 21st century and explore the 991 and 992 generations of the Porsche 911. Okay, so we're in the 21st century now, and the 911 continues to evolve. The 991 generation debuted in 2011, a completely new platform.
Yeah. The third major redesign since the original car, a significant leap forward in technology, performance, everything.
It was a head-turner for sure, but there was some controversy surrounding the introduction of electric power steering.
Right. A lot of purists weren't happy about it. Felt like it took away from that classic 911 steering feel.
What was Porsche's reasoning behind the change?
Well, they argued that electric power steering was necessary for a couple of reasons. Improved fuel efficiency, and to make way for all those new driver assistance systems.
Which were becoming increasingly common at the time, so a necessary trade-off in the name of progress.
You could say that. But Porsche's engineers did put a lot of effort into tuning the electric power steering. to try and make it as responsive and as close to the hydraulic feel as possible.
And of course, we can't talk about the 991 without mentioning the engines. Some serious power under the hood.
Oh, yeah. The base Carrera got a new 3.4-liter engine, 350 horsepower. The Carrera S, a 3.8-liter with 400 horsepower.
And then, of course, the return of the turbo.
More powerful than ever before.
More power, more technology, more refinement. It's the 911 way, isn't it?
It is. But the 991 wasn't all about brute force. Porsche also introduced some interesting new models, like the Carrera T stripped down. Driver focus.
A back to basics 911.
Exactly. And who could forget the 911R limited edition? Combine the GT3 RS's engine with a 6-speed manual gearbox.
A true modern classic. Best of both worlds. But speaking of modern performance, we have to talk about the 991 1.2 update in 2015. Big changes under the hood.
Turbochargers. Across the entire range.
Well, almost the entire range.
Wait, so even the base Carrera models went turbo? They did. It was a big change. Some purists weren't thrilled. They saw it as a move away from the 911's naturally aspirated heritage. But Porsche argued that turbocharging was the best way forward for performance, fuel efficiency, and to meet those ever-tightening emissions regulations.
Adapting to the times, once again.
Exactly. And as you might expect, Porsche did it brilliantly. The turbocharged engines in the 991.2 were incredibly responsive, tons of torque. Made the 911 even more fun to drive.
And I imagine it opened up a whole new world of tuning possibilities for those who wanted to push the limits even further.
Oh, yeah. But even in standard form, the 991.2 was incredibly quick. The Turbo S models could do 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds.
Incredible. From a 130 horsepower sports car in the 60s to a sub-3-second supercar, it's amazing how far the 911 has come.
It really is. But the story doesn't end there. We have the current generation, the 992s, debuted in 2018, the culmination of everything Porsche has learned over the past 6 decades.
A fitting tribute to an automotive icon.
It is, and the 992 continues to push the boundaries. In terms of performance, technology, design, it's a truly special car.
What do you think makes the 992 stand out?
I think it's the way Porsche has managed to blend cutting-edge technology with that classic 911 feel. The 992 is incredibly advanced, but it still feels like a 911.
It's a car that can do it all, isn't it? Track days, weekend drives, daily commutes. It's the ultimate all-rounder.
Absolutely. It truly lives up to the legacy, performance, versatility, and that timeless style.
Well, it's been an incredible journey. From those air-cooled beginnings to the turbocharged marvels of today.
Yeah.
The Porsche 911 truly is a legend. A huge thank you to all you Vintage Car Chronicles listeners for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, we have new episodes every day, so be sure to check back for more automotive adventures.
And for those of you who want to learn more about the Porsche 911, we've included some links in the show notes.
Until next time, keep those engines revving.